Cinematography has been around since the late 1800s and is being expanded on more and more each day, with new cinematographers learning new tips and tricks to expand the film industry to its fullest. The film industry is forever growing, with more and more money spent each year, with the competition for the best film piece growing more and more each year. In the last 30 years alone, a whopping $1.2 trillion has been spent in the industry, but the payout is 3 times that amount. But it didn't all start there. With big budgets and huge casts, it started with a little invention called the kinetoscope, made by Thomas Edison and a small team in 1892. Edison was a man of many talents and had a huge bucket full of ideas he wanted to do himself, but didn't have the time. To make his life easier, he set up a small team in a research camp just outside of Menlo Park, New Jersey. One of those team members was William Dixon, who was set the task of creating the machine that would animate photos, and as Edison quoted, the machine would do for the eyes as the phonograph does for the ears. Finally, William Dixon had 2 types of camera, a kinetograph and a kinetoscope, and the film industry was born. Once the camera was born, it didn't stop there, as they still hadn't made any moving images. Challenges came thick and fast for Edison and his team, as they still needed something to capture for their moving object. Luckily, Edison had a good friend, Etienne Jules Mouret, who invented the chromophotographic gun that he had used to do motion studies on animals. As soon as Edison understood the camera, he rushed back to Jersey to fill in his team. They found that paper film wasn't going to be durable enough to play over and over again, so the birth of a new film strip was created. The cellulose film strip. Cellulose film strip was coated in a light-sensitive emulsion, which allowed it to be a lot more durable and for video to be played back through Edison's machine. Edison then passed this on to his friend George Eastman, who was also known as Eastman Kodak. He made 50-foot rolls of the film to be able to capture longer videos for Edison's machine. These worked successfully. Creating the machine, Edison blew up the film industry, and it expanded more and more as time went on. As years went by, more and more tools and inventions were created to expand the filming world. One huge invention that allowed the cinematic world to expand was the dolly. First created in 1907 by Victor Rabi, having a dolly allowed a camera to be mounted onto a track and have a camera operator capture a smooth panning shot. The first film to use the dolly was in 1912 in a movie called The Passer-By. This allowed the creators to get a more dramatic emphasis into their story. Another tool that really pushed the filming industry was a Steadicam. First invented in the 1970s by Garrett Brown. Having a Steadicam allowed filmmakers to move a stabilized camera on a person and allow them to capture free-rein, clear and non-shaky shots. The first movie that used the Steadicam was Bound for Glory, filmed in 1976, which later on awarded them a Best Picture. Having these tools allowed cinematographers to really flourish and get recognised, such as Roger Deakins, an English cinematographer who studied at the National Film and Television School and has worked on some really big movies, such as Skyfall, Shawshank Redemption and 1917. Another great cinematographer is Rodri Prieto, a Mexican cinematographer best known for his work on The Irishman, Wolf of Wall Street, 8 Mile, and Passengers. I managed to get a chat with a media enthusiast called Russell. Russell has been a cameraman for many BBC productions, the main one being one of Britain's most famous soaps, EastEnders. I managed to ask him a couple questions on today's modern filming. Working on EastEnders, what techniques did you pick up that helped you progress down the line?
After fiddling about in the media for a bit at university, it really come apparent that I wasn't an editor, and I really thought I was that person that could cut, change, make moves, whatever. But then straight away from my peers, and these were university students, these weren't even people in the industry, that really I was absolutely completely rubbish at doing it. I really couldn't put something together. So luckily I got an opportunity to work on EastEnders. Firstly is just like a work experience thing. And the biggest thing I learned was just forget about the storyline, forget about all that. It's about a multi-cam shoot and knocking out 2.5 hours of program a week. I mean, some films take a couple of years to do the same kind of length film. So it's kind of like it's a factory, but not like mass-produced factory. Because I don't mean factory in the way it's like Ford, where they're printing out the same forged bit of metal. I mean, this stuff is amazing. And I remember a guy called Peter Woodley, which was I don't know if he is now, but he was the camera supervisor of EastEnders at the time. Yeah, the first thing he said was, "Well, when you walk through a door, how does everything come at you?" And I was like, "What? What are you talking about? I don't understand what you're saying." And he said, "Well, so with a camera you can zoom." I was like, "Well, yeah, you zoom everything in." He said, "But yeah, but your eye doesn't zoom. So what you do, you've got to move the camera, not the lens, and then you've got to play with the aperture, and you've got to play with the lens, and you've got to feel the camera, right? And it's not about the body behind the camera; it's all about the lens." And that was the biggest thing I learned, that to replicate something real, you've got to make it real.
What's your personal view on film in the modern day, and which do you think is the better format to shoot movies on?
So people talk about film and what's better and what's not. For me, again, I think it's all about story and content rather than how it looks. I mean, you can make something look really great, but I mean, if there's no story behind it, I don't think it carries much weight. But saying that, there's this thing about just sociology does play a part. Without getting deep, and I'm not a sociologist or an anthropologist, but I do believe that with time, we're getting more aware of our surroundings. So, say for instance, in 1975 when Jaws come out, it was a scary film. But I think if you brought Jaws out now, people would be like, "What is this?" I mean, like Meg from with Jason Statham in it. I mean, people just don't. It just doesn't work anymore. So it's a combination of things. So I think there's always room to improve. I always think you know, there's lessons to be learned. But I think we can always make a better film. But there are always going to be the classics. But then that more goes into things like cinematography, like with the Goodfellas, where you get that one scene where, with one steady cam, they leave the car, they walk over the road, they go through the back door into a restaurant, they go down the back straight street of the restaurant into the restaurant, and they sit down. And if you're a film buff, you'll know what I'm talking about. And that was just one scene, and it's amazing.
Film has only been around for 130 years and it has come so far. This industry is finding new ways to expand more and more each day, and it's unknown how far we will be able to take it.